right, you can forward. Thank you. So again, to remind you, these 3 questions that we're going to explore, I'm going to repeat them to you. We like to engage, for those of you who have seen us before, in a really personal way with these questions because we find it gets the conversation going, and that's what we're most invested in, is to have the conversation with you all. So you will be seeing some very personal family photos. Be prepared. So the first question was, when have you felt powerful, either at work or at home? This is a really interesting one for me because I think for most of the first, I would say 5 years of my career as a freelance journalist, I felt anything but powerful. I really entered the industry at a very fractious time when things were sort of all falling apart, and I felt as if most of the time, next slide, I was emailing like this. This is sort of my general experience. I was living in Brooklyn, a bunch of roommates, trying to get by, sending pitches constantly, mostly feeling like I was emailing into a black hole. Couldn't really figure out what I was doing wrong. So I have to say it was a really difficult time to enter the workforce, but also an exciting one because things were starting to shift, and I had a feeling that if I could just get a foothold, that I might be able to live my dream, which was to be a writer. Although sometimes I have to admit I felt like my cat, next slide, was my only friend and assistant. This is her looking through my sparse Rolodex at the time. So I found my power in 3 very specific ways. Next slide. One was by finding good mentors, and I can't emphasize this enough. I found a lot of women and a few good men. You see my beloved professor here in the corner, who my new book is dedicated to, Dennis Dalton, and some other folks who are filmmakers and philanthropists and psychologists. You might even recognize a few of the faces up there from some of the women on this stage. And what I did was I basically created like a rock band team of mentors who could provide all sorts of different wisdom, skills, life experiences that I needed. And I really found that this was, remember back to my emailing into a black hole and feeling like my cat is my only friend, this became my lifeline. This became, the sort of team of people that I really depended on to get through the difficulty that was starting a freelance career and sort of developing the resilience I needed. One of the things I really noticed about the people I ended up gravitating towards was that they all had a real psychology of abundance. And I think that's a really important sort of phrase to use in an intergenerational conversation, because I think it's one of the places we get tripped up, is sort of having a psychology of deprivation, which means there's only enough for a few of us to have power, versus a psychology of abundance, which was mentors who said, come on, honey, like there's enough for all of us. Your success is my success. And just to give a specific example, when Deborah was pregnant with twins, she got a call for the Shriver report that was actually referenced in the beginning intro, and to contribute to it. And she was in a place, as you might imagine, where she wasn't doing too much writing at the time. And so she said, you should really call Courtney Martin because she could give a good perspective on this. So I was included in the Shriver report, which is a huge opportunity for me that wouldn't have existed otherwise. So it's that idea that any opportunity that comes in, even if I can't do it or someone else can't do it, it's an opportunity for someone we know, and we're going to sort of pass on the wealth. There were, of course, times, and I have to admit this because we had very honest conversations in this intergenerational panel, when I did not feel so empowered by my, quote, mentoring relationships. Next slide. These are examples of the anti-mentoring I sometimes received on my way. So one was, you're like the daughter I never had. I don't know how many of you have received that quote. And actually, in some ways, it comes from a very beautiful place, right? But when it comes from someone who you actually don't feel like you have much of a relationship with, it feels like they're trying to mold you into the mini them, right? They don't really see you as an authentic, separate human being who might have dreams of your own that sort of diverge from whatever they are thinking you should be doing. So that was not a good moment. Another one was passing on cynicism. And I see this so often. It is one of the saddest things that I feel like is repeated so often in intergenerational relationships. In my case, it was, going into this sort of writing profession, having older writers say to me, like, I can't even stand to introduce you to a literary agent because it's such a terrible industry, or, if you can do anything else, do it. And I was just hungry. I knew this was what I wanted to do, and so that kind of feedback was really hard on me as I was sort of making my way. And then finally, as I mentioned, this sort of zero-sum game idea that somehow it's tit for tat, I mentored you, now you owe me, as opposed to the psychology of abundance of rising tide lifts all boats, right? Let's see. The second question, going now to shared power. This is actually the other key, in addition to mentoring, to my success has been really focusing on creating communities where I share power. So next slide, please. This is my crew at feministing.com. These are most of the editors. And it's a site that gets over 750,000 unique hits a month. That's more traffic, more readership than Ms. Magazine has ever had. So when people say feminism is dead, tell them go to feministing.com or one of the other really lively, amazing blogs that are keeping feminism alive and well. We together run Feministing. That's 6-7 posts a day, every single day, Monday through Friday, plus a couple of posts on the weekend, where we analyze issues through a young feminist lens and also sort of the issues that are in the mainstream media, and we also try to make news ourselves, sort of point out things that are stories we think aren't getting enough play. And we have become this collective leadership. We really try to put each other forward at any opportunity. If CNN calls and wants to talk to me about something, but I know Samita, my friend in the green dress, is really the one who should talk about that issue, I'll put her forth as the name that should go there. And so we're really trying to be part of this new generation that's galvanizing not just one face of leadership, but a collective face. And for us, that's about race, that's about class, that's about sexual orientation. It's really about broadening who can identify with feminism. Next slide, please. This is just a few members of my writers group. And my writers group, I actually started it 5 years ago, and it's basically the equivalent of, 8 people in their 20s and 30s who get together in each other's living rooms every other week and critique each other's work. We have this incredibly bonded sort of crew because we've all been through those first couple of slides with the cat and the black hole of email, and we've supported each other through that. When we started, I was the only one with a book deal, and now we've had multiple book deals and all sorts of wonderful things happen to everybody, and I really attribute it to our capacity to be there for each other and really take each other seriously before the rest of the world did. We really show up for each other and give each other feedback and really sort of give each other the support that we might not otherwise have if we were in our rooms feeling alone with the words. So the last question, when have I felt the power to create work-life balance? I have to say, as most of us do, I don't think I've ever achieved that balance. I think it's, a constant ongoing process for me. But the thing that I am really committed to and have learned pretty quickly because of the sort of tenuousness of my career is that the healthiest thing I can do is redefine success. So next slide. I think, every writer's dirty little secret, whether they tell you or not, is that they write the book they need to read. So I wrote a book about perfectionism. This is my first book, and I didn't really suffer with some of the specific manifestations that I wrote about, which were around body image, but I did suffer from having some really outlandish expectations for myself. And what I learned really quickly was that in order to feel good about myself, in order to feel healthy and effective in the world, I had to really reframe what I thought success was. So I talk a lot about the shift from, a success based on appearance or achievement to one based on fulfillment, on relationships, and on joy. So those became sort of my new markers of what success is. And further, my latest book, next slide please, Do It Anyway, The New Generation of Activists, also a book I wrote because I needed to read, really grew out of my disillusion with social change. I felt like I'd sort of been raised on this kind of empty rhetoric of, save the world. And then I went out in the real world and I was like, it is really hard to do this save the world thing. I don't feel very equipped to actually make a difference. I don't know how to make daily choices, particularly in this very globalized, corporatized, bureaucratic world. And what I discovered through the journey of writing this book was that it's less about, and I steal this from Cornel West, who says, of course you're gonna fail, but how good a failure is it? So I'm newly invested in failing really, really well, and always trying to fail better than the way I failed the day before. Next slide. This is the crew of activists that I profiled in Do It Anyway at a retreat we were at together. So it gives you a sense of that joy piece I was talking about. With regard to work-life balance, I also plan on failing really well. Next slide. I already do this, just balancing working really hard, writing books, blogging, writing my column, engaging in activism, going to dance parties, maintaining a wide-ranging group of amazing friends, spending time with my family. This is my mom and dad and my brother, who is my best friend. Next slide. Here's a bunch of friends of mine. This is, again, the joy in relationships, right? And when I have kids, which I'd like to fairly soon, I'll probably fail even more beautifully, is my guess, although I have some amazing role models on the stage here. The institutional structures, adequate and affordable childcare options, maternity and paternity leave aren't in place for anyone to really feel empowered to achieve work-life balance. And as a freelancer, I've got it particularly bad, although I get some precious flexibility as a trade-off. My challenge will be doing the tough and very intentional work of negotiating a balance with my partner, who also wants to do meaningful work and be a present parent. Next slide. This is my partner dancing with his nephew, godson. And I just want to end on that note. Perhaps that's the best news of all, is that for the first time in history, in a very broad way, it's very normal for both myself and John to want the exact same things. We both want really fulfilled work lives, and we both want to be really present in our families. And so I think that, to me, that's where the hope lies. Thank you.